Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm so glad to have you here. It's going to be, goodness gracious, it's going to be amazing, as you probably can tell. Um, I'm Ben Eubanks, your host for this session. Many of you are coming back from HR Summer School, the first round. Some of you are brand new, just stepping in, just finding us. Welcome. We're so glad to have you. If you can't tell, the chat, the conversation's already lively, and it's just going to get even more so once we have some of our amazing speakers stepping up to the plate. So I'm glad to have you here. And one thing I'll say out front, if you didn't realize this is your show. Take the time to connect, click through, touch space with the people that are in the chat there. They are like you. They want to improve their perspective on the world. They want to understand more about the community. They want to be inspired and be an inspiration to others. And so I hope you'll take that opportunity to do that. As I mentioned previously, this could be new for some of you, but it's a good refresher. My mission in life is to make HR better, one HR pro at a time, and that includes you today, listening in, chiming in from wherever around the world. I saw someone say, hey, I'm in Atlanta, I'm in Nigeria, like all over the place. People are coming in, and I can't wait to hear, I can't wait to share what the speakers have to say today. So our goal for summer school, educate, connect, inspire. And I hope today you get all three of those in good measure. And speaking of the community here, one thing I'll tell you, just to give you guys a shout out, we actually had we ran through our analytics last week, looking at it with the team, trying to figure out, what worked and everything else, looking at our feedback from the event, the survey feedback. It was amazing. I'm still just blown away by all that. But the numbers at last check, more than 1.25 million, that's million minutes of HR Summer School have already been watched by HR professionals around the world in the trenches, trying to make themselves better, trying to improve what they're doing. So that's so exciting for me. So, goodness gracious, I am failing here. I will make sure I have this at one of the breaks today. I'm going to show you our yearbooks. I just got those yearbooks in. If you got one of those, I'll show what that looks like. And it was just a fun way to kind of commemorate this experience together. It was a way for people that wanted to donate something, wanted to give something, as a way for them to support the community right now. So that's again, I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. It's just a fun way to share the experience and get to hear and see another layer of perspective from your speakers, things like that. So it was a lot of fun to put those together. Thank you so much to Melanie for making all that happen, because she's amazing on the design front. I can talk all day, but design is not my thing, so I'm thankful for that. Okay, so there you go. I've been loving the comments over the last few weeks, and I don't know about you, but it's been so much fun to see everything, and not just because everyone's thankful, because we heard from Renee Robson during our summer school. She said, when people are grateful, when you're a grateful person, you encourage others around you to be more grateful people. And that's a good thing. But in addition to that, we're seeing, and I'm hearing some amazing comments about people that are doing fun things. They're taking steps of leaps of faith. They're stepping out there. They're trying to seize career because they were so inspired. And I got permission from Jessica to share her story here. So I'm going to pop that up on screen so you can see. Oops. So Jessica said, hey, just a quick update. I got a job as the director of HR. So congrats to Jessica for that. She said that summer school really helped her. And again, that's not just me. That's not shining a light on myself. She was encouraged by all the comments, the connections she made, the encouraging speakers, everything else. And so that's so much fun to see that impact on the broader community. That's one life changed. And I know there are lots of stories like this from some of you others. So if you have a story like that and you want to share that with the community, share that with me, please do. I'm so excited to see how you're taking control of that career and taking control of what's happening in spite of what's going on all around us, and share it openly so we can all celebrate with you. Short message from me before we jump into the content today. I want to encourage you to do something. I want to encourage you, as we're going through the conversations. We have Kimberly kicking us off. We have Sarah, and then we have Eric, and they're all going to talk to us about different things, different topics, but there's a theme weaving through that. And I want you to think about how to be more creative. Think about new solutions, new ideas coming out of that. Doing what you've always done means you'll get what you've always gotten. If you keep doing the same thing, you'll get the same result. And we all could make the argument that we want some different results in our work and our careers and things like that, the outcomes there. So Jessica is a good example of that. I want to tell you a quick funny story that'll make that impactful for you and make you think, like, let's think differently. So NASA is actually, they have a probe on Mars right now. They're trying to dig under the soil and do some discovery and things like that. And the probe got stuck recently, and they were trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we figure this out? And so what they did is they decided to get creative. They did something that they never would have done. 77 million miles away, this problem is they're trying to solve, and they decided to take one last effort to solve that. And their solution was to take this multi-million-dollar piece of equipment and hit it with a shovel, and it solved the problem, right? So we all have the problem in front of us, that opportunity in front of us to look at the problems that we face differently. And I write about creativity a lot. I talk about it in my book and my new book that we're working on now. That's a key human skill, but it's also one of the things that I encourage HR leaders, like, let's build that creativity muscle. It's not a thing where you get it or you don't. The doctor never says, congratulations, it's a creative when the baby's born. No, it's an opportunity for all of us to encourage and build that muscle to be more creative so that we can bring solutions to the business, bring solutions to the people, support them. We don't want to be the policy police. None of us got into this field for that reason. So do something different. And I'll give you a chance at the very end of the conversation today, before we wrap up, to talk about how you can do that differently. I'll give you a chance to talk about one big idea you got out of today's sessions. And so hang tight and we'll get to that. So without further ado, let's get into our content for today. I promised 2 amazing speakers in addition to what you're already expecting from Sarah Noll Wilson. The first is Kimberly Jones. And we're going to talk about talent acquisition, hiring, strategy, technology, whatever else we can lump into that time together. We're going to dig into it. Kimberly, I loved her personality and her approach, and she's just energetic, but she says that she's a self-proclaimed superhero, and you're going to see why very shortly. So let's all put our capes on, leap into action with Kimberly. Let's get her up. Hey everyone, welcome to our fireside chat here at HR Summer School. These are our extra credit sessions, so it's going to be extra good. I'm going to put her up on a pedestal there. I'm really excited to talk about talent acquisition here with Kimberly Jones. Kimberly, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Well, you and I had chatted before summer school, and I was like, man, we've got a great agenda, but I want to figure out a way to get you in, and it just so happened that we did. And so I'm so excited about this conversation. I've been looking forward to it. So before we dive in and dig deep into TA, will you tell the audience a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Kimberly Jones, Kimberly Denise Jones. I usually use my whole full name because I happen to share my name with a celebrity who happens to be a rapper, which is kind of interesting when you're traveling. And so I have been in talent acquisition for more than 20 years. I started my career at Nationwide Insurance Company in Columbus, Ohio. That's where I'm from. And have been really fortunate that I've worked for some awesome companies in some fantastic roles. Honda, Raytheon, GE Aviation, Northrop Grumman, NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. One of the things I'm very proud of in my career, I can genuinely say I have staff positions on all 7 continents, and that's not something that most TA people can say, but I am genuinely a recruiter at heart. I actually love what the talent acquisition function does specific to HR. And so after having done that for all of those companies, I decided in 2017 to launch my own talent acquisition consulting practice. So I launched Kelton Legend in 2017. And what we do is provide consulting for strategy, process, resources, team structure, and technology. And as if that wasn't enough, I added another title. I am also an instructor at the University of California, Irvine, in the Office of Continuing Education. I teach a course in technology applications and talent management, and this is specifically for international students. So as much as I am there teaching, I am also learning. And so I really appreciate an opportunity to be here with you today to help share with your audience.
Awesome. Very cool. Goodness, you've got such a fun range of things, and that recruiting on every continent, that is a really neat claim to fame there. I have never seen that, and hold on to that one, because that was special. So let's talk about talent acquisition. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna dive into it. And one of the things that I'm always careful to do, I don't want to call people out, but I'll call myself out for this, because this is something that I know I've done when I've been in the recruiting seat before, is it's really easy to get heads down and to be focusing on, okay, I'm just gonna get this job requisition done. I just got to get this thing posted out there and then I'll be good. Or I just got to get these interviews scheduled. And it's easy to just churn away and never take a step back and think about the strategy, the big picture of it. I know that's one of the areas you focus on specifically, is you encourage leaders to step back and look at that big picture strategy. Will you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, sure. So for me, I look at it almost like a recipe. If I'm trying to bake a cake, I know a cake has ingredients. And so when you think about the cake as the finished product, you understand then why the ingredients are necessary. So for example, if you bake a cake with no eggs, the cake is flat. That's what eggs do in a cake. And so when you think about the rec by rec mentality, or just what we do are the ingredients, but this is all tied to your talent strategy. And so when you look at an organization's business strategy, you should be able to then create a talent acquisition strategy that specifically ties to your business strategy. And so now if I have one rec or 40 recs open for software engineers, I'm not just filling a rec. I am making sure that my software organization has the talent that's necessary for us to continue providing the best possible service or resources. I understand now why it's really important for me to have a great sourcing strategy, to make sure I'm following up with candidates, that I take the time to conduct a really good phone screen. And if after that phone screen, I realize this candidate isn't right for this rec, I know how best to manage passing that candidate off to another recruiter or keeping them kind of in my pipeline for the next time I have an opportunity open. And so those, being able to step back and see the bigger picture is really important, so that you don't get exhausted or bogged down in those rec by rec moments.
Okay, so give me an example of that, if you don't mind. You mentioned like software, right? That's certainly a space out there, or a type of job industry. Talk about how someone's strategy might look different if they're at two different kinds of companies, maybe a small company versus a large company, or I'm in retail versus I'm in software and technology. Like, I don't know, pick a dichotomy there, I guess.
Yes,
But give me an example of what some different things might look like, because it's easy to say, well, they all post jobs. Yes. They all interview. Yes. Yeah. But those are the things that are easy to do. Those are the things that are easy. Like I was saying, you could just keep doing those things and turning away at it. But if you don't stop and take a big picture look at things, then you might end up trying to recruit like someone in another industry or something else, and it's not going to lead to the best outcome. So will you give me an example of that? And then I want to ask you specifically about the technology stuff, because I think that's an area that you have a lot of expertise in. But I want to ask this question first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so let me focus in on what you said. For example, small companies. Small does not mean that you cannot be fantastic and innovative. And so a lot of times people believe that I'm small and I don't necessarily have a large budget. It costs you $0 to say I work for a great company. And so every company started as a small company. So for a strategy for a small company really is about the quality of your message. And so as you're reaching out to candidates and you want to really convince them that, I'll still go back to software engineer. If I'm a software engineer who works for a company that's only 50 employees, or a software engineer who works for a large bank, my role, my job duties themselves might be the same. The impact that I have on my organization might be dramatically different. So you talk about, being a big fish in a small pond. So this strategy specific to a small organization, when you find a candidate, you get a candidate on the phone, it's really important to talk about why we're different. You might also have a message around why we are better. Like, why is it better? Not just because we're smaller. What's the quality of the work? How do you have an opportunity to impact the success of the organization? How does having access to the leadership team, because we're all 8 feet away from each other. Well, we're all working from home right now, but how might that impact it? And so if for a small company and their strategy, you're always competing with a lot of other companies, but what's the quality of your message, and how versed are you in articulating that message to candidates when you source or when they apply to a position that you have?
I love that. Being really careful about how you position those things, because that helps to set you up for success. That might make it easier to recruit some people. I was going to tell you a story, but I don't want to take away from your time. If we get time at the end, I want to tell you the story because I think you'd appreciate it. It's just a cool recruiting idea that someone else used. But let's talk about the technology thing for a little bit, because part of my job is to keep track of the technology vendors in the space, and that is no small task. We talk to hundreds a year, and you teach a course on this, so you're neck deep in it too. Talk a little about what that space looks like, and maybe some ideas for how someone listening to this that doesn't spend the time that you and I do digging into that, how they can stay abreast of the latest and greatest, or how they can, kind of keep their finger on the pulse of what they need to know, so they can be ready for what they need to be ready for when they're thinking about that.
So I'll talk about it in three ways. One, I think just over the past 20 years, the HR technology space has grown exponentially, like exponentially. Before it was just, because companies, were big established legacy companies who had dollars. And now where we are, you have a great idea, you're looking for investors and venture capitalists to fund your great idea. And with that, nobody is depleted on ideas of what type of technology. And so when you think about what we do, the technology makes us feel like magicians. The fact that I can disposition 172 candidates all in one keystroke feels like magic and a blessing all at the same time. And so where the market has evolved, where there were just limited big players, there are a multitude of players. And we've also evolved from, which I appreciate, vendors who attempt to tell you, oh, buy our suite because now you only have one product. That is such an outdated concept. Everybody has integrators. And if you've produced a product that doesn't play well in the sandbox with others, that's not a selling point for you. It's actually certainly will impact your demise in the industry. And so there's an expectation now that if I have a really robust strategy and process that I'm trying to execute, I may very well, as a chief HR officer or a chief technology officer, say, I want the best in class solution for every single stage of my process. And so being smart enough and being resourced enough to make those decisions is really important. The other piece around just being knowledgeable, not everybody is well versed in technology. The thing that I am the most troubled by every time I see it is the random question from somebody that says, what's the best ATS? What's the best candidate assessment?
Oh, you're not going to tell us what's the best one?
I cringe every single time, because the word best is relative. And when you're talking about a subjective and an objective decision, it has to be based on fact. What's best for me and my company's process may not be what's best for you. And so in a very linear way, I try to make sure anybody that I speak with, strategy is what you're trying to achieve. Process is the method by which you achieve it. You use technology to execute your process. And so if your strategy and process aren't the exact same as another company, it's somewhat disingenuous to say, oh, this one is the best. We can talk about the attributes or the technical capabilities of that particular system. But if those technical capabilities don't help you execute a process that then gets you to your strategy, then you pay for a bunch of shiny stuff that you never really see the benefit of. And so, we're SHRM, Baker's Dozen. I think there's one called Software Advice, where it will give you this laundry list. There's grocery list of providers. It will give you an overview to prove your worth to your organization, to make sure as a TA person you have proved yourself as an indispensable resource. You have to have really documented strategy and process before you go out to market to say, here's what I'm going to put into my RFP to tell a vendor what I'm looking for. With that, you also have to be smart enough. Don't let a vendor sell you something you don't need or you don't know how to use. I appreciate that there are lots of other additives in the system, but don't get sold on people who are in the business of selling you things. And that buyer's remorse is one of the worst feelings you can ever have about a car, a new hair color, or HR technology. You have to make good decisions, because 90 days after, a year after, 2 years after, you don't ever want to be sitting in a position of, they gave me what I asked for, but was it what I needed? Mm-hmm. And now I'm still not happy. and now I'm about to break up with this ATS and make the same mistake with another new ATS provider. That happens all the time.
It does. It does. Well, one of the things that occurred to me there as you're talking is I talked to a friend recently. He's the head of talent management for a large university, and they just are about to implement a brand new HR system across all of their talent functions. And he said they spent the last 18 months. They made the decision to put it in place 18 months ago. And they're large, 1,000 employees, but they spent the last 18 months getting everything ready, getting their processes ironed out, getting everything set, because so often we have a kind of a sloppy process, and we're like, oh, if I just buy that technology, it will fix that. Is it going to fix that?
You can systematize an inefficient process. Plenty of companies have done that.
Say that again. You can systematize an inefficient process. Yes. Just a heads up to everybody out there. That's not a good thing. Don't do that, please. But again, it's one of those things. It's not. No one intentionally sets out to say, let's not follow their candidates. Let's post things that job ads that make people cringe because the list of bullet points 50 deep. They don't set out to do those things. But if you don't, I keep saying this over and over because I want it to stick with the people that are listening to this. Yeah. If you don't take that big picture approach, you don't step back and think about it. You don't. Here, I'll just go ahead and put a name on it. Put your Kimberly hat on for a little bit. Please. Look at this from the 10,000 foot view and say, hey, how would someone outside the organization see this? How does this feel for our candidates going through it? If my CEO is looking on my shoulder at this process, would they give it the stamp of approval from the business perspective? Or what is that flaming mess you have over there? Like, how in the world are you making that work? So
it's okay. You know what? So here's a couple
getting all hot under the collar over here.
A couple things I'll share with people. That big picture is something I really focus on when I meet with clients, virtually or in person. I want a room with a whiteboard because I like to document in front of people what they're telling me. And once they say it versus being able to see what they told me, typically will help people have some epiphanies around like, oh, this is effed up. This is not what we really want to do. And so just having that visual is important. The other thing that people do, well-intentioned but not always the best process, they want to create a flow chart with diamonds and arrows and circles, if this and that, and here's how you get back to here. I appreciate that, but it rarely helps organizations uncover things that tend to be process flaws or gaps in their process. And so one of the other things I do, especially when you're trying to configure technology, is identify what you're trying to achieve and specifically script out how you want the system to support that particular function. That will typically help you draw out a better end-to-end configuration. So when you say 18 months, I know some of that is politics, but some of that is also making sure, do we let this process die where it is because we don't want to carry it over? Or have we thought about the 3 or 4 different things that could happen at a particular stage in the process that also need to be factored into it? Because if your system doesn't support every single step and now you create a workaround, you've also now lost a potential metric, and you've also given every person on your team the ability to make it up how they want to handle it. And now you are training a new person and they'll say, this is not how you're supposed to do it, but this is how I do it. That happens all the time. And so that big picture and then the details that go along with it tend to be a fail safe of maybe not 100%, but it gets you closer to 100 than the 70 that I think a lot of people end up with.
I love that. Goodness gracious. I want to keep asking you questions, but I know we're kind of short on time. If someone is loving this conversation and says, I want to get some more Kimberly, I've got to hear some more of this, I want to learn more about what you're doing, or just follow you because you are obviously sharp in this area, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can find me on my website, keltonlegend.com, KELTONLEGEND. They can find me on LinkedIn under Kimberly Jones, Talent Acquisition Superhero. They can also email me at KimTheJ, KIMTHEJ, at keltonlegend.com. I am bi-coastal, Ohio and LA. I answer phone calls in every time zone. And so whenever people reach out to me, I am very quick to respond.
Awesome. Truly the superhero. Well, I appreciate you. I know everybody else does, but I appreciate you joining me, Kimberly. This has been so much fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I look forward to partnering with you for sure.
Awesome. Wonderful. To everybody else, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Stay tuned for more coming right up. So I told you that she's a superhero, and I think that came through pretty quickly, pretty obviously there. All right. Sarah Noll Wilson. I'm so excited to hear to see this one go live. We're going to run hers a little bit differently to make sure everything plays appropriately. I'm beginning to think that Sarah's got so many big ideas that's why I had a tough time playing it on our live stream earlier this month. So we're going to get hers queued up here so that we can all enjoy what she's got to share with us. Give me 1 second. We'll get this queued up and set. And all right. It's one of those tricks where if you press the right button. Okay. Come on. There we go. So while we're waiting on me to get this thing set up appropriately, one of the things I told you I'd show you this. These are our yearbooks. We have some fun stuff in here. I mentioned the first day of the event. This is in memory of Chris Fields, who's one of my friends. We lost him earlier this spring, and he was a connector in the community. And so this is in his honor. We put the event together and just dedicated that to him. Message from, as Greg Hawkes likes to say, Principal Ben, and some other stuff there. Sponsor stuff, pictures of all of our amazing speakers, some quotes and things from the speakers, just like you'd get in a real yearbook, a real annual from school. Some fun things from them, a special note, some notes from from some of you, some of those success stories and things like we shared earlier. Some of those things are out there as well, and all that good stuff and more. So there's so many great things about it. I can't wait for you to see that. And oh boy, come on now. So I've tested this thing like 10 different ways, and everything has worked just perfectly. And now I'm trying to make sure we get it right. 1 more second. I apologize, everybody. It's worth the wait. Come on. Here we go. Right file. Right now. Let's get this up on the right screen, and we'll all be able to hear from Sarah. All right. Things are looking good. Here we go. Let's bring Sarah up and let's hear from her. I'm excited about this, and obviously I'm ready to have this one in the books and recorded and displayed out there so everybody can check it out. Here we go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Noll Wilson, and I am so excited and honored to be with you here today. I am the owner of a leadership coaching and consulting company where my team and I work very closely with leaders and senior leaders to help them build and rebuild their relationships, with an emphasis on that one, because that's usually what's happening. But I am just so excited to be here because, when I was a kid, I never wanted to be a part of summer school because that meant that maybe you were struggling and nobody wanted to do that. But I want to be a part of this. So happy HR summer school. Yeah. So in full transparency, I have this whiteboard and I just wanted to use it. So that's what's going to be on the whiteboard today. I want to give a big shout out to Ben Eubanks and his entire team who have organized this, because it is really incredible, their time and dedication to pull this together, to get speakers together, to get us together in a time when we can't be, so that we can connect, so that we can share information, and so that we can learn and grow. So for the last 10 years, I have been trying to understand, explore, research, experiment How do we free the elephant in the room? How do we take care of that pesky little thing that gets in our way of us being able to be successful? So for the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to share with you some of those key findings I've learned over the last decade. Now, I also understand this is a very complex topic, and it's one that's easy to talk about intellectually, but it is a very different situation when you're the one who has to bring it up, or you're the one who has to acknowledge it. So I just want to call that out. But my goal is to give you some really good tips, help you understand some traps, and then also talk about some specific techniques that we can do. So let's talk about the three main areas we're going to cover today. And the first is, we'll spend a little bit of time understanding and identifying, like, how do we identify the elephants in the room? The second thing is, we'll explore, why do we avoid them to begin with? And then finally, we'll spend some time identifying some key steps for how to address, or as I like to call it, free the elephant. Now, you might be like, Sarah, why don't you just call it calling out? That's what everyone calls it. I use the term freeing very intentionally. When I hear the term, oh, you just got to call the elephant out, usually it's shared. I mean, just even that term is like, just got to call it out. There's an aggression behind it. And I don't know about you, but if there's an elephant in the room, that tells me that the stress or the anxiety is already heightened, and we don't need to match it with heightened behavior or language. So I like to think of it as like free. We're just gonna free the elephant. We're just gonna let it doesn't want to be in there. So let's dig into, what do we mean when we talk about what's the elephant in the room? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about, imagine that somebody was like, I've never heard of this term, because this isn't a globally understood term as I've learned. This is a metaphor that is used very much in the Western world. And so I'm curious to know from you. So go ahead and put it into the chat. How would you define the elephant in the room to somebody who wasn't familiar with it? Those are some really, really great definitions. I'd like to share with you the way that I like to define the elephant in the room. And that is, it is a known conflict that is creating a harmful barrier and goes unaddressed. And I just want to take a moment and highlight three really specific words in this definition. That is, it's a known conflict, that it is something that at least one person is aware of and observing and knows that this is happening. It's creating a harmful barrier, that it's not physically, but it's getting in the way of us being able to do the work we were meant to do. And most importantly, and this is what makes it an elephant, it goes unaddressed. Let's imagine that I was in your team and I was observing what behaviors would emerge when an elephant is in the room. What might I see people doing that would give me a clue we may have an elephant lurking around here? So I'll give you just a moment to share in the chat what behaviors emerge when an elephant is in the room. I want to share some additional ones, and they may have been covered, because let's be really transparent. This is like virtual Sarah, and then live Sarah is actually participating in the chat. Isn't she great? All right, so here we go. So you know you have an elephant in the room when you have unusual silence, right? If this is normally a really chatty group and suddenly they just become very quiet, or have you ever been in it where somebody says something and people become very interested in their notebooks and they're just like, oh, I'm really interested in this. So just that's a clue, like, ooh, we might have an elephant here. Not making eye contact. Again, we're focused here. I'm in sort of an avoidant mode and not trying to make eye contact. Or potentially you might see people side-eyeing, like, here, the eyes are saying, here we go again. There she, does that, or whatever the case might be. Another good indication that you might have an elephant around is that there's meetings after the meetings, that we are leaving the meeting and then we're talking about what happened in the meeting in a way that, again, is unproductive or harmful to us being able to do the work. And then lastly, that, changing subjects and joking. And this is an important one I want to highlight a little bit, simply because sometimes joking is a way to diffuse tension in a healthy way. It's a healthy way to soothe things. That's tricky. Say that 10 times fast. We don't need to spend our time there. Okay. But if people are uncomfortable, that they might use sarcasm, which might be like really close to contempt. And so we just have to be aware that these are some of the things that we might see when we notice that an elephant is there. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how are elephants created. And this is a perspective that I've developed over the last, again, 10 years of my research and observations and just my own experience. Is that a lot of times when we talk about the elephant in the room, sometimes it's almost like the elephant is the person we're talking about. Like, oh, Tony's totally the elephant in the room. But I want to reframe the definition, because the elephant is created when we become aware of something that, again, is causing a harmful behavior and we don't acknowledge or address it. So it's actually the act of us knowing it's there and purposefully avoiding it that creates the elephant. And this is why I love this image, because when everyone is aware and not saying anything, they own that elephant. They have helped create that elephant. So now let's talk about why it's so important for us to free the elephants in the room. And I know we know it's important, but I just want to offer you some specific language and perspectives. And that is this concept called psychological safety. We know that high-performing teams, one of the factors that sets them apart from average or low-performing teams is this idea of psychological safety. And I want to break down, what does it look like in practice? And you can imagine how this would contribute to having a highly productive, highly creative team. And the first is that I can be myself, right? That I'm safe to be who I am, that I feel safe to take risks, that it's okay to make mistakes. And one of the most important factors of a high psychologically safe team is that I can discuss difficult topics. And as I go through these, I want you just to think about organizations or teams you've been a part of, that maybe you've had some of this, or maybe you didn't. The other is that I can ask for help and my contributions are valued. Now, here's the thing with when creating a psychologically safe environment, it means the heat is going to be turned up. It means that if we're creating the space for us to be able to disagree and to challenge ideas and to bring up, just different perspectives, that's naturally going to bring the heat up. And if we have a culture where we don't deal with that, what ends up happening is, right, all these little elephants come in, and suddenly, instead of having the conversations we should, we fall into this pattern that I call violent politeness, where we just sort of smile and nod at each other instead of actually engaging in the really important work that we need to do. So let's talk about great relationships. One of the things that I often hear when I'm working with people as we're navigating these, how do we have these tough conversations? What does this look like? Is people will say, I just don't like to have conflict. I just don't like to have that discomfort. Great relationships do not avoid conflict. They have conflict and they know how to thrive because of it. Now, it's not just saying oh, you have conflict and now you're a great relationship. No, but really healthy, effective relationships can step into, and I might even change the word, maybe it's not conflict so much as it is just uncomfortable conversations that require some courage on both parts. And the thing we have to realize is that in relationships, there's always going to be times when we come together and we fall apart, and we do this again and again and again, right? So it's all about, how do we show up in that moment of discomfort? How do we recover from that? And how do we move forward from that? So I'm curious, now that we've spent some time with identifying, what do we notice with an elephant, how an elephant is created when we avoid the conversation, I'm curious for you to take a moment and reflect. And the question that I want you to think about is, how have you fed an elephant? What things have you done? Now, this is, I understand that I'm asking you to do a bit of a fearless audit right now. And I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. I have fed an elephant by not having a conversation with somebody. I have fed an elephant by talking to someone else about a situation instead of talking to them. So there's lots of ways that we feed an elephant. So I want to give you a moment. And in the chat box, I want you to just jot down, kind of tell on yourself. What are things you've done to feed an elephant? We've all fed elephants from time to time. So I want to share with you 4 different types of elephants that I've been tracking over the last 10 years. The one that I call the avoidaphant. This is where we avoid a conversation that needs to happen in order for us to move forward. So we create an avoidaphant when we avoid either acknowledging or talking about and exploring something that is creating that harmful barrier. The next one is what I lovingly call a blameophant. And a blameophant is where we blame someone instead of owning it ourselves. The next one is called the imagiphant. And the imagiphant is when we've told a story about a situation or about a person, right? That we've actually created the elephant because we're making some assumptions and we're not testing those. And again, none of these make you bad people. It just makes you human. And then the last one is the deflectophant. And the deflectophant is where we deflect the conversation or the acknowledgement instead of addressing it. And deflecting, typically what I see is that deflecting will show up as sarcasm and we joke about things. And again, like that's a way we can soothe when we're stressed, but it can become really unproductive, especially when that deflecting can become sharp or hurtful or very sarcastic. And so I'm curious, just take a moment and in the chat, what elephants have you seen? And maybe you've identified other elephants that I don't have listed here. But what are some common ones that you've experienced either in your organization or in previous experiences? So we've identified that there's an elephant in the room. We go, whew, okay, I think there's an elephant in the room. Pretty sure it's an avoidaphant. Pretty sure I created it. So let's talk about what we can do. So here's our simple model. First, to get curious with yourself, then to get curious about others, and then, if necessary, get curious with others. And I'm going to break down specific reflection questions and actions we can take within each of these. So this is where we're really getting into the meat of what we can do to free the elephant. So the first is we need to get curious with ourselves. And so I just want to share a couple of key questions for you to ask yourselves as you reflect on what is the situation at hand. So the first question is just, what am I feeling? Oh, I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling humiliated or disappointed, or whatever the case might be. What is my current perspective? And I want to be clear, when we talk about perspectives, I'm not talking about an opinion. I'm talking about a perspective. Your vantage point on the situation is just one vantage point. Like right now, I'm recording this and your vantage point is seeing my slides, and what I see is my computer and the camera and the lights. I have a different perspective, right? Is this a preference or is this a performance issue? And sometimes we confuse the two. A preference is, maybe I really value execution and efficiency. And maybe this person over here, values creativity and exploration. And it could be that there's things I'm doing that are frustrating you that are not necessarily a performance issue, but it's just a preference conflict. Here's a super fun fact about relationships. About 70% of most conflict within relationships, personal, professional, comes down to what we call perpetual conflict. It's just differences. It's a difference of opinion. It's a difference of style. It's a difference of values, right? So this is why it's so important for us to go, is it a performance issue or is it a preference? This next question is a particularly hard question, I think, for a lot of us to ask, depending on the situation. And that is, what role did I or do I play? What role did I play in causing this or perpetuating it? And what role do I need to play? And then finally, just to ask yourself, what do I need in this situation? What is it that I need in this moment? So I was working for an organization, and there was an individual who I had to work fairly closely with. And she was responsible for the, protecting the brand. And there was a project that we were working on that required me to move very, very quickly. And we were making some decisions that weren't always like 100% perfect on brand, but it was internal. And so the leadership team's like, it's good enough. And what would happen is that whenever she would see this, the conversation with me never felt like a conversation. It always just felt like a confrontation. And for me, my perspective was I felt like I was getting lectured. And it got to a point where it was like, oh, I wasn't saying anything to her about how I felt. And I started to feel uncomfortable when she would come over. I started to avoid her, right? Elephant. And I finally realized, like, I'm literally avoiding this person who I need to be working with. And this is a problem. So I took some time to reflect, and with really great help from some friends to help me think through it. And, what I was feeling was I wasn't feeling valued. I wasn't feeling like we were having a conversation. My perspective is that my CEO was asking me to move super duper fast on stuff, and we didn't always have the time to go through the proper channels. Preference or performance issue? It wasn't a performance issue. It was a preference. And what I realized was I asked myself the question, what value of mine is being stepped on right now? Because whenever we feel prickly, whenever we feel, that's just the best way to describe it. We feel prickly. The best place for us to identify like what's our perspective and what's our preference is to ask ourselves what value is being stepped on or not honored. And for me in that moment, it was not being heard. Curiosity, as you know, is a huge value of mine. And when somebody just comes at me with like, you did this, you need to fix this, and doesn't even take the time, again, my perspective, to explore and get curious with why did I make the decisions I did, that really triggers me. Now, what role did I play? Do I play? I realized that if I was being really honest with myself, which I needed to be, that I could have done a better job partnering with her in the beginning. And so again, I can use this when I have that conversation. So what do I need? I needed her to understand how I was feeling every time we were having an interaction. And I also recognized that I needed to understand how she was feeling as well, which brings us to the next part of the model, which is getting curious about the other person. And so here's just a couple of simple questions we can ask. How are they feeling? Now, I will say that you don't know how they're feeling. I think that it's always good for us to at least take the step to get curious with, to think about it. What's even better is having the conversation. But if you just took a pause and, if you notice, oh man, there's an elephant in the room, I'm going to get curious myself, and now I'm going to get curious about the other people involved. You can't be furious if you're curious. I love that phrase. I don't know who came up with it, but it helps you see possibilities you didn't see before. The second question that we want to think about is what makes sense to them? As much as we think our ideas are right and we like our ideas and we prefer our perspectives, their reality makes sense to them somehow, right? And so it's really important that we explore this first, within ourselves before we have that conversation. And then finally, what do they need? What do they need? And again, you might not be able to have these conversations, or you might not be able to get this information without having a conversation, but it's really important to even just reflect on this. Here's a good indication that you need to move from, just thinking about it to then having a conversation. If you get curious with yourself, and if you get curious about the other person, and you aren't able to free the elephant within those two areas, that's a good sign that your curiosity is sort of stalled and you need more information, which means you have to have a conversation. Now, I want to pause a second and just share this story that I think is such a beautiful example about getting curious with yourself and getting curious with others, and how you can free an elephant without actually needing to have a conversation. I was actually delivering a workshop on this topic to a hospital. And it, was going great. And on the break, one of my key partners that had brought me in, she came up to me, she said, "Oh man, Sarah, I realized I have been feeding an elephant the whole time we were here. Once you started breaking down how we needed to get curious with ourselves and curious about the other people." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, "Our boss isn't here." And I was really irritated that she wouldn't come to this training that's so important. And she said, "And so what did I do? I started talking to other people. Do you know why she's here? Do you know why she wouldn't come? Oh, that just irritates me so much." She starts blaming and avoiding. She has this there's all these elephants stampeding around. And when we started talking about how can we free the elephant, and we started to get curious, she realized that oh, I'm literally not talking to the person I need to. And even when she realized that, when she started to get curious about the other person of why her boss might not show up, she said, it just dawned on me because I know she has something more important to do because she wouldn't have missed this unless there was an emergency. Poof, the elephant went away. And I just had to laugh because she came up, she's like, I've been carrying this damn bucket of peanuts around and I've just been throwing them around and feeding this elephant while you're teaching us how to free the elephant. So this is an example how just taking some time to get curious with yourself, curious about the other person might be enough to let go and to lose some of that harmful barrier that's in place. Now, what do we do when we have to have the conversation? This is where I'd like to go to the next part of it, which is we get curious with the other person. And there's 4 key practices with this. And again, I know I'm giving you a lot of information, but I want to give you some concepts, some things to chew on in hopes that a few of these will stick as you think about your next conversation. And the first is we need to prime the conversation. We need to think about how do we prepare for that conversation effectively. Next, we need to share our observations, like share our perspectives, right? All the things we thought about, how are we feeling? What's our perspective? What do we need? Owning our role. And then we want to invite their perspective. It is so important that when we are in a heated moment or an uncomfortable moment with another person, that we give space to their perspective, their needs, their feelings as well. Because if we don't do that, then it's not a collaboration, it's a competition. And when it's a competition, like when we're trying to fight for who's right, who's wrong, like we aren't going to come out of this together. One of the ways I like to think about relationships is that I have my island, you have your island, and together we need to create our island. It's not about me getting you over to my side or you getting me over to your side, but we need to create something together. So after we've invited their perspective, then we need to create from our differences. Right? And so we need to create something for it. And again, I understand that like not all conversations, like we can't script a difficult conversation, right? We don't know where they're going to go, but we certainly can be prepared so that at the end of the day, we can show up in a way that feels true to us, that feels aligned with our values, and hopefully we'll achieve a good outcome. But even if that doesn't happen, we at least can leave feeling really good about how we showed up. So let's break down some of the practices with priming a conversation. And I'm going to share with you some of my tips, and then we're going to give you some time to share yours. So when I have to go into a tough conversation or a conversation that's just uncomfortable, or if I'm working with a client to do it, there's 3 key questions I always want to take time to think about. And that is, what impact do I want to make on them, on the relationship, on me, on the situation? Who do I need to be in order to make that impact? And then what do I need to do to help influence that? And the reason this is important is because sometimes when we're agitated or we're, heightened in our stress or emotions dealing with an elephant, because again, the elephant is usually not comfortable. If it's comfortable, we'd have the darn conversation, right? So we know that it's going to be uncomfortable. What is important for us is to regulate ourselves, right? And we know that when we can regulate ourselves, we can help regulate the situation. If I'm dysregulated and all over the place and I'm just coming in, like I'm going to call it out, I'm not going to be able to calm down a heightened situation. So to prime the conversation, we need to think about what impact do I want to make? Who do I need to be? Like, I need to be curious. I need to be compassionate. I need to be willing to be wrong. I need to be whatever that might look like. And what do I need to do? I need to listen and not interrupt. I need to ask clarifying questions, right? So you see how this works? So then we move into talking about sharing your observations. And here's just a couple of phrases. And again, I'm not giving you a script, but sometimes we need starters to get us started. But if we're in conversation with somebody and it's like, we've primed ourselves and now we're moving into sharing our observations, you might start with some language like this. I feel like we've been avoiding something and I was curious to get your thoughts on it. Or I've been struggling lately with our relationship and I wanted to talk to you to see what your perspective was. Or I want to talk about this before it becomes an elephant. If you have shared language about the elephant, this can become a really effective way for us to enter into the conversation. So I want to pause right there because I've been giving you a lot of content and I want to give you a chance to share some of your wisdom because I know that you've had plenty of conversations and I'm curious, what are some phrases or questions that you like to start with in order to enter into a conversation that might be uncomfortable. So I'll just give you a minute to share in the chat. Thank you for sharing those. So we have primed our conversation, we've shared our observations, and now we want to make sure that we invite their perspective. Because again, it's not enough to say, here, I'm going to tell you how I feel. You don't get to say anything. I actually heard that. Somebody was sharing a story recently that a family member, when they would get really frustrated, was like, I'm just going to tell you how I feel and you don't get to respond. Like, no, that's not how we navigate these things. So let's talk about what does it look like to invite their perspective. And so again, there's no one way to do this, but here's just a couple of questions that we can ask ourselves, or ask them, excuse me. What are your thoughts on this situation? How do you feel about this? And here's a really important one. What would be important for me to know? And now the situation I shared with you with my colleague where I felt like she was lecturing me, I wanna come full circle with that, because when she and I had the conversation, I mean, and I wanna be clear, like I'm talking about it very articulately now, but my heart was racing. I had to practice it in my head. I had to talk through things. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't unintentionally escalating it. And so as we were talking and I was sharing with her how I felt and how it was affecting how I was showing up, she was like, well, this hasn't been easy for me either, because I didn't know this practice of getting curious with the other people yet. And I was like, tell me more. And here I found out that she was really disappointed that she was left off this project. Now, that wasn't necessarily my doing or my decision or authority, but I had no idea that she was feeling excluded. She was feeling like she wasn't valued. And so, like, of course, anytime anything came up with this project, it was a little prickly for her. And it was like an earth-shattering moment when I heard her perspective and how different it was, and she heard my perspective, and it was like, oh, okay. So this isn't actually, like, in a weird way, it's not about us, but now we can create from this. So, like, how do we want to move forward with it? And it was one of the first times that I experienced this beauty of now, like, creating from our differences. So let's talk about that. So here's some questions we can think about. Knowing what we know now, what do we like? Where do we need to go? Or how do we move forward from here? And again, you hear how this, like, genuine curiosity and compassion, or just, again, like, what are your thoughts? So I want to give you another minute to just share in the chat, what are some other questions we could ask or ways we could explore, once we've shared our perspective, we've heard their perspective, and how do we move forward from here in a way that will be productive to both? Thank you for those. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this final thought, and that is, it's so important to understand that, yes, this is not easy work. It's messy, but hopefully that you can walk away from this with some tips and some practices to identify, like, even if you come out of this just going, I'm going to start naming elephants, I'm going to start identifying, even if you don't get to the point of freeing them, this is a step to freeing them, right? This is how we get there. That would be amazing. And I want to leave you with this final thought. Practice makes easier, not easy. Whenever we are talking about relationships, there's something on the line. There is something on the line, whether it's the relationship we have, whether it's our status within the team, whatever it might be, that you can build up these muscles. But when something really matters, it's never going to be easy. It'll just be easier. Thank you all so much for your time. I look forward to chatting with you in the box, answering your questions. And thank you again to Ben Eubanks and the rest of the team for putting this on. I would love to stay connected with you. So if you're interested, please continue to follow our journey. And you can connect with me at sarahnollwilson.com or follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, where all the cool kids hang out. And I would love to continue being on your journey as you now free the elephant. Thank you.
I told you it was worth the wait. And I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I loved hearing from Sarah all the great ideas on how to free the elephant. We've got some new ideas there. They even came out in the live chat that weren't in the session. someone said, hey, stop bringing the peanuts, or don't stop feeding it. So peanut free zone. Again, having some fun with it. But also, I love the last thing that she had to say there. We can make it easier, but it's not going to be easy. It shouldn't be easy, probably. It shouldn't be easy to do these things. It shouldn't be easy to have those conversations that are really hard. If you've lost emotional touch so much that it's not hard for you anymore, then that's probably worth some self-reflection. So I love hearing what Sarah had to share there. Our last talk today, we're going to hear from Eric. Let me get the slides queued up here so you can see his wonderful picture. Oops. There we go. Eric Turigian. Eric is a CHRO, Chief Human Resources Officer. He's an HR executive, but he also has this passion for helping people with their careers. And I asked him to come and talk to us, not just about generic career stuff, but also about, like, for those people that want to be an HR executive someday, or if you want to, one day you're like, hey, I want to be an HR consultant. I want to eventually get out of doing this day to day and go do that. Or I'm trying to get into HR. Right? Heard of a lot of people that are trying to make that transition just to get into the field and start getting their feet wet. So whatever your headspace might be, Eric has some good ideas here, some really practical kind of tools and things to help you think about. So if you don't have something, I actually got mine out just now to make some notes during this, because he'll give you kind of a model to draw out that you can start thinking about where you're spending your time, and if those activities that you're doing are actually taking you to the place that you want to go. So here we go. Let's get Eric up, and we'll hear what he has to say. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fireside Chat here at HR Summer School. Glad to have you here for our extra credit session. I'm excited to talk to Eric Turigian. He's going to talk to us a little bit about CHROs, what you need to do, what you maybe need to stop doing, and some of those kind of insights to help those of us that want to level up our HR careers and really improve our standing in the space. So Eric, welcome to the conversation, sir.
No, thanks, Ben. I really appreciate it. And I'm really honored to be here. I love what you're doing. Because I can remember when I started in HR, there was a few people who would help you in the day. And the day it was a lot more locked down and information was controlled. And now it's more open. It's open platform. And people like yourself are doing so much to add to the community and add to HR that I'm happy to give back.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. And I'm excited for you to share some of your ideas and stuff today. Before we get into that, will you tell the audience a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm the Vice President of Global HR for Akibono Brake Corporation. So in that role, I run US HR for about 4,000 people. We do a lot of global work, global crossover, supporting global employee relations. I also have communications, which is always a challenge. And it's really just, at the end of the day, I'm the Chief Experience Officer.
I love that. So the reason I asked you to come here today, I was really curious, and I'd love to hear from you about what it takes to become a CHRO, right? There's some things you and I were kicking around, like there are things you need to do, things you probably need to quit doing. And I know you've done some analysis on this. Do you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, so, it's been a long road for me. And I took a lot of assignments in my career, my background, that nobody else would do. And I went and did the hard stuff because I was learning the hard lessons. And I think that that's important to do, but you've got to do it with a plan. And I started, and there was a person in labor relations when I started at Ford. I started in 1989, a long time ago. And he already had 40 years of experience, which, if you do the math in your head, means he started post-war. So in the late 1940s, he started working in labor relations, right? A different day, different era. And he told me one time, he said, you have the opportunity to get 30 years of experience, or you can get 1 year of experience 30 times. It's up to you. And it stuck with me. A lot of his little things stuck with me, but that one for sure did. So over my career, I've looked back, and I'm an analytical person. So I like numbers, graphs, charts. I like to break things down into things I can manipulate. So I came up with this thing I call my time tool. You want to throw it up? Yeah, thank you.
There you go.
So this is what I call the time gap analysis tool. And what I like to do is I like to use this tool to track activity. So on the vertical axis there, I ask people, I want you to graph how much you enjoy doing something. On that horizontal axis, I like to graph out how much do other people value this activity. So in other words, how much can you get paid for this? Will companies pay you to do this thing? So real quickly, you end up with 4 quadrants, right? Quadrant number 1 in that upper right-hand corner is your sweet spot. Those are the things that you really enjoy doing that the companies are willing to pay you to do. When you migrate over now to quadrant number 2, you can move to the left. These are going to be activities that you still really enjoy to do, but the companies don't necessarily value this, or no one's willing to pay you to do this. When you drop down now to the bottom left, those are the things that you don't like doing and that the companies don't value. Those are your time wasters. Oh, by the way, at quadrant number 2, those are your hobbies. When you move into quadrant number 4, those are the things that you don't particularly care to do, but the companies place a lot of value on, and those are your dues. And let's think about that for a little bit. The things that are down in that quadrant number 4 are things like record keeping and keeping hiring forms and immigration forms and all of the bureaucratic work that we do. But those are the things that are the entries to do the stuff that we really love to do. So all the stuff that you have spent a few days in session on and talking about employee engagement and world-class employee relations and succession planning and strategically leading the company through people initiatives, those are quadrant 1 sweet spot things. But if we don't do quadrant 4 right, we're not allowed to do quadrant 1. Quadrant number 3, the time wasters, we just need to stop doing them altogether. Now, most people look at this and like, okay, yeah, this makes sense to me. I work a lot in 1 and 4. But if we can go to the next slide, where we tend to end up doing is, I've graphed out 3 different zones that I like to look at. So the first zone, there you go.
Sorry.
The first zone, let's look at the red zone for a minute. That's what I call the ineffective zone. And that's where a lot of people and a lot of times we all end up there. And it's doing time wasters and hobbies. And we're completely ineffective. Kind of the next level bad, so going from very, very bad to just sort of bad, is this unfulfilled zone. So that's the yellow section there, where you have a lot of people who are working on time wasters and doing their dues. So in the unfulfilled zone, to the organization, you still provide value and you're still going to be in your role. And you know what, if you're not careful, you can do the unfulfilled zone for 30 years and you get parked in there because you're providing some value the company likes. You're not adding any value to yourself and you're wasting a little bit of time. Where we need to do is we need to work and get our efforts into this target zone. So target zone, you can see there's my green zone. And I want everyone looking at, how do I work on primarily sweet spot items? How do I nail the things that are the dues that the company expects me to do? And then how do I even move over a bit and get some of my hobbies to come up into this zone? I had a really interesting discussion with another team of people just last week. We were talking about quadrant 2 and hobbies. And right now, in our current climate and our current culture, you see a lot of people monetizing quadrant number 2. And that means they're moving quadrant 2 into quadrant 1. And what do I mean by that? Well, look at YouTube. Look at the content that's on YouTube. You know, my son and I, Christian, he likes to get up early in the morning. I like to get up early in the morning. So he usually by 6 a.m., him and I are downstairs in the family room. So sometimes we'll throw on YouTube. And we found these people that are doing these old rusty tools, and they find these old like grinders and coffee grinders and lawn mowers and just complete wrecks. And this, I think he's a millwright or a tool and die maker or some skilled trade, takes them all apart, sandblasts them, cleans them, polishes them, welds them, fills in the metal, gets everything looking beautiful, powder coats it, puts it all back together, and he's doing these wonderful restorations. And Christian's just riveted to it, just loves it. What I've been thinking the other day is, look at this. This person took something that's a hobby of his, took some skills, and is migrating those into the sweet spot quadrant because he's now got a platform where he can monetize his hobbies. And he's now figured out a way that I can add value with things that I just love to do. And that should be our goal. So what I think you need to do to get to be a CHRO is you need to sit down and you need to first evaluate the route. So what that means is, if I'm going to tell you, I want to drive down to Florida. Well, you need to know where you're starting from. If you don't know where you're starting from, you can't even get on the road. Like what the old joke says, you can't get there from here.
Yeah.
So once you can evaluate who you are today, and this is the hard part, because you got to be really honest with yourself. Then you have to evaluate the finish line. And there's an old, I think it was Zig Ziglar said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll hit it every time.
Yes.
So you got to set up some goals, and you got to have some direction and where you want to head. So what I always coach people to do is take that role, that CHRO, CFO, CTO, whatever it is you aspire to be. I don't care what it is. You pick it. You pick the role you want to aspire to be. Now go onto LinkedIn and you look at 10 people who are doing that today. And I want you to go through their background. And I want you to identify 3 skills that they have, 3 experiences that they've gotten, and their education. And then I have a tool, it's called the Career Gap Planner. I didn't send you a copy, Ben, so we can't put it up on the screen, but the Career Gap Planner, we're gonna map all that out. Then we go through and we look at the patterns and we identify the patterns. Now that will show you, for someone who wants to be a CHRO, for example, there's gonna be commonalities. So for example, labor relations, you're gonna have to have labor experience to be a CHRO. Okay, great, now you copy that over to the second part of the Career Gap Planner. Now you look at your background that you did in the first step and you map it out and you say, okay, I need labor skills. I don't have them today. How do I get them? When do I get them? Where do I get them? Then you can build a strategic plan that says, I need to do these. I'm going to be a CHRO in 15 years. And you know what you do? You write that down on a piece of paper and you tape it to your monitor because you make the commitment. I am going to do this. Then once you've made that commitment, you take that map. Now you have a map that says, this is how I'm going to get there. And again, in my book that's going to be coming out shortly, I go into this in a lot more detail than we can here in this fireside chat, but there's a lot here in this. Now, Ben, if we can go back to the last slide.
Sure.
Here's your assignment. And everyone, I want everyone to do this, and you can email it to me, and we're going to give you my contact information, and I'll spend some time and I'll go through it with you. But you need to sit down for the next week, the next 2 weeks, the next month, actually forever. And you need to start mapping out where you're spending your time. So what you do is you take a sheet of paper, and for every day you write down 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m., noon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever your working schedule is. At the end of each hour, and you can set your phone to ding or your computer or tomato timer. There's a lot of different tools. At the end of each hour, you need to sit and analyze and think to yourself, where did that hour fall? What quadrant did I just work in? And make an X. And then what we're going to do is, when you get all of this data on here, we're going to graph out where you're working. And what we're going to find is most people tend to be working in that quadrant 3 waste quadrant before we try to run. So just map it out on here. Once you have a picture of where you're spending your time, then we can start to map those skills that you identified onto this chart. Now you'll know what things to stop doing and what things to start doing. And you'll get somewhat of a mathematical plan or a roadmap to where you need to end up. Sounds like a lot of work, right?
It's anything that's worthwhile is probably going to require some work. Right? Otherwise,
Exactly.
you're not going to do it. When you said that a minute ago about write this down, put it on your monitor, look at it, all the time because you need to focus on it if you're going to hit your goal. The thing that popped in my head, there was a story I read years ago about Jim Carrey, the actor, comedian. He one day had a really hard childhood. He actually got into comedy stuff because his mom was very ill and he would do things to try to make her laugh. And one day he drove up to the top of this mountain, just kind of looking out over the city, and wrote himself a check for $1 million. And in the foreline, he put for acting services rendered. He said, one day I'm going to be worth this. I'm going to make this worthwhile. Right. And then kept that with him until he eventually got paid $1 million to make a movie. And it's a cool story, but it also, like, all of us can do something like that. Write down what you want to be, write down what you want to do, but then you're giving some specific practical tools here on how to actually take steps to make that happen, make it a reality, not just a wish.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I do an exercise again in my book where I tell people, I want you today to write the announcement that your target company will use when you join them as the chief of HR. What will that announcement say? What things are they going to brag about to the marketplace that they got in you? What things are they going to, what value do they perceive you adding to the company over the next few years? Because in there will give you the formula for what you need to be doing to be prepared.
I love that. I love that. That's a really neat exercise. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and these are sometimes tough. They're soul searching exercises. You got to spend some time. You got to think about them, and it's not always fun to do, but it's good to do. And you do it, and you keep adapting it and adjusting it and moving it forward. A vice president at Frito-Lay used to always tell me, we always reserve the right to get better, and don't let how badly we've done something impact how well we can do it. So before we start sounding like a leadership book or excerpts from
well, the activity you talked about, writing your own kind of press release for when someone hired you, I was thinking that sounds like the activity, hey, write what you would want on your tombstone, think about it, and work backwards from there. It's a little bit less.
That's where I got it from,
morbid.
actually.
It's a little less morbid than that, but it's a great activity because that seems very practical, very tangible, and all of us right now could take 2 minutes and do that. Think about what sort of things I want someone to say about me, and if I don't have that right now, how do I get that? How do I think about that? What path do I have to take? How do I have to gather those skills, things like that? That's a phenomenal way of looking at it. I love taking those things and adapting them for people.
Well, and here's where I got it from, Ben, is I was watching, I don't know if anyone likes Frasier or not. It's one of the shows, it's the, one of the guilty pleasures I like. When I had to put something mindless on, it could be, Big Bang Theory, or it could be Frasier. So if you go Google Frasier writes his obituary, because they have an episode where he actually sits down to write out what his obituary will say. And it's hilarious. It's like climb a mountain. He's like, well, strike that one off now. But it's a fun little half hour, but it'll give you the energy and the passion to dive into this exercise. Because there's probably not insurmountable challenges in front of you today. There could be in 20 years if you wait 20 years to start it. It's like Christmas. We know Christmas comes every December. How many people start budgeting their Christmas budget earlier than that? Wait till November, they say, how am I going to spend all this money now in 1 month? Yes. What if you started in January and said, okay, I'm going to put $100 aside every month? You'd have $1,200 to spend for Christmas. So it's kind of like that same theory.
Yeah, absolutely. I said anything worthwhile requires some work, but it's worth it in the long run. So if someone wants to connect with you, Eric, wants to learn more about what you're doing, the work you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I'd love it. And so there's a couple tools that I would say would work really well. The first is I have a weekly newsletter. It's more of this type of stuff. Like I dive into that tool. I pull a job off of LinkedIn and random, and then I talk about the job, how I would approach getting the job, like how would I strategize it, and I put that in there. And then I also do a showcase of a headhunter or another professional in HR, and I pick a showcase each week. So if you want that, it's completely free. www.tarigian.com/free newsletter. That will sign you up. You'll get the newsletter. I've got all my stuff out there. I've got my blog. I've got my YouTube channel videos. I've got all my podcasts. Anything that I do, I throw it on there as well. So it gives you one place to go find it all. Get me on LinkedIn at Eric Tarigian, or the simplest way is eric@tarigian.com.
Wonderful.
So what I'm going to ask is that action item. When you have your time planner filled out, and Ben, you can please send that deck to the people who are participants. When you get the time gap analysis tool filled out, please send it to me. I'll go through it and give you my comments and feedback.
Awesome. Wonderful. I'll push that up there on screen so everyone can see that one last time. Eric@tarigian.com. You can see his name, how it's spelled there on screen. Eric, I enjoyed this. I'm over here like making some notes and things, and I don't know that I aspire to be a CHRO right now, but that's the idea still applies regardless of where I want to go. And I love the approach. I love the insights you shared. Thank you so much for being generous for your time.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really enjoyed it too. And my parting comment is, it doesn't matter what you do, do it with passion. Do it so all of the heavens will look down and say, here lived a great street sweeper, and just have fun with life.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. To everybody else, hang tight. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. We'll have more coming right up. So if you didn't recognize that quote that Eric used to wrap that last session up, he said, the street sweeper quote, that's actually a Martin Luther King quote. If someone's called to be a street sweeper, I'm going to paraphrase here, let him sweep so well that anyone who sees him says there was a great street sweeper and he did what he was called to do. And whether you're called to HR, you're called to recruiting, you're called to some facet of this, you're that person that no one can understand because you love benefits so much and you can't wait to get into, ERISA and all the other fun things that are involved in that, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Find that thing that you love and do it with some passion. Do it with whatever you have to bring to the table. So we've gotten a lot of insight today on how to improve our communications and our culture, by extension, I would say, from Sarah. Our approach to recruiting, thinking about that with a bigger picture viewpoint. I hope you walk away from Kimberly's ideas on how to think big picture. Obviously, some career-oriented things to help you so that a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, you aren't doing the exact same thing in the exact same way. It's just nothing says you have to leave your company, but you should be doing it in a different way. You should always be learning and growing. And so we got some great ideas there. I'm going to call it a win, but we're not done. We got a few more minutes left, and it's not HR Summer School without some prizes, right? So what do you say we give some things away? We're giving away something that we've been working on behind the scenes over here for a couple of months. Finally, almost ready for prime time. I was hoping to have it done by today. Not ready yet. It's called My HR Fit. And we're going to give this away to 10 people. Make a post on LinkedIn. Tag me. Tag HR Summer School. But talk about the one idea that you got out of today that you can go back and put into practice. Just one idea. I don't expect the full summary of everything, but hopefully today something struck you from Kimberly, from Eric, or from Sarah. You're like, that is the thing that I'm actually going to do and change. It wasn't just an idea or a concept, but I want to do this thing. So again, I don't expect 10 paragraphs or anything else. Post about those, tag Summer School, tag me, and we're going to do a drawing, pull out 10 of those. So My HR Fit, really quick, you probably have no idea what that is, and that's not on you, that's on me. So we're working on this. It's going to launch in July. And it's essentially a way for you to think about your strengths, your gifts from an HR perspective, right? Lots of assessments and tools like that out there, but they're all very generic. And so we wanted to create something that's really targeted at HR and talent professionals. So maybe you're looking for a job. You're like, what kind of company would be the best fit for me in the way that I work? Well, that'd be really helpful to know. Maybe you lead a team and you want to know how to engage with them the best way, or you're adding someone to that team and you're like, I've got to make sure we don't upset the team dynamics, and you understand what sort of gaps we have and how we can fill them. Maybe you want to know how you can use the strengths you have in the current role that you have to really enjoy what you're doing. Spend some time in that sweet spot, as Eric was talking about, and less time on the time wasters and other stuff, and focus on those things that really are valuable for you. So that's the focus. There's lots of different applications of it, and we'll be talking about all those as we come out. But everybody that gets drawn there will get will get their own version of that once it's released. They'll be the very first people to ever see it. And Summer School, you guys are going to get to see it before anybody else as well. Once those people get theirs, we're going to make sure and share it with the Summer School graduates. You can see it before the public can, and get some insight into that, because you have proven in the last few weeks, in the last hour and a half, that you want to do more, be more. You are not okay with just going through the status quo of your career. I'm so excited about that. So stay tuned for that. That'll be coming very soon. We'll be watching for the rest of this week to tag the people and grab you that are throwing your name in the hat to get one of those prizes. Okay. With that, we're going to wrap up. Our time went quickly. It seemed like it went really fast. I want to say thank you again to the sponsors who made HR Summer School itself possible, made it available for all of you. We are going to be sending out emails. We've already sent out at least one. We're going to send out more of them over the next 2 weeks, a note from each different sponsor. So if you heard from the team at Milestones and you thought that was really cool, we're going to send you a note from them. If you heard from the team at Intrepid and you're like, I'm really curious about what they're doing, we'll send you a note from them. Take some time, read through those. If there's something that's really appealing to you, just check it out. Let them know you appreciate them sponsoring, and I would appreciate that for sure personally. So I've been excited to share with you today and throughout this whole thing. And one of the clear comments that came from the survey, the feedback, and everything else is that everybody wants more of the summer school kind of dynamic, not just content, but the interaction, the connectivity with each other. And so stay tuned. We'll be announcing some more things coming up. I have no doubt. I have no doubt. So until then, don't forget, you have value, and I appreciate you being part of this community. Class is dismissed.